The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction, its crystal walls pulsing with soft blue light that matched the rhythm of alien heartbeats. 12 different species sat around the massive circular table, each delegation representing billions of lives across the galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thoughts and sounds into something each species could understand. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat quietly at the human table, his simple black suit looking plain next to the colorful robes and biomechanical armor of the other delegates. His gray hair was neatly combed and his hands rested calmly on the polished surface before him. He had been Earth's voice in this chamber for 15 years, watching civilizations rise and fall while humans slowly found their place among the stars. The Zephyrian delegate floated above her seat, her jellyfish-like body shifting through different shades of purple and orange as she spoke. Her voice came through the translators as a melodic hum that somehow carried the weight of absolute authority. She had called this emergency session 3 days ago, claiming that important decisions needed to be made about the future of the galaxy. "Fellow members of the Council," she began, her colors darkening to deep violet, "we must address the burden that has been placed upon our alliance. The human species has been granted membership in our council for 20 standard years, yet they have contributed nothing of value to our great civilization." The Korthak representative clicked his mandibles in agreement. His insect-like form towered over his section of the table, compound eyes reflecting the chamber's light like tiny stars. When he spoke, his voice buzzed with mechanical precision through the translation matrix. "The humans possess no advanced technology," he stated, each word punctuated by the clicking of his jaw plates. "Their ships are crude metal constructs powered by simple fusion drives. Their weapons lack the elegant efficiency of plasma or quantum disruption. Even their computers rely on primitive silicon circuits rather than bio-neural networks or crystalline matrices." Ambassador Morrison remained silent, though a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. He had heard these arguments before, usually from species who measured advancement purely by complexity rather than effectiveness. The human delegation had prepared for this day, knowing it would come eventually. The Etherian representative shimmered into visibility, her energy form barely contained within the crystalline housing that allowed her to interact with physical matter. Her thoughts projected directly into the translation network, bypassing the need for sound entirely. "Their military capabilities are equally disappointing," she transmitted, her mental voice carrying undertones of scientific analysis. "Humans rely on kinetic weapons and explosive devices, technologies that most species abandoned millennia ago. Their tactical approaches lack sophistication, depending on overwhelming force rather than elegant strategy." The Altarian trade minister nodded his scaled head, fins fluttering with barely contained disdain. His species had mastered interstellar commerce when humans were still discovering fire, and he never let anyone forget it. "From an economic perspective, humans contribute little to galactic trade," he said, his gills flapping as he spoke. "They produce basic manufactured goods and agricultural products that any developing world could supply. Their resource extraction methods are inefficient, their manufacturing processes wasteful, and their trade negotiations lack the sophisticated financial instruments that drive modern commerce." One by one, each species added their voice to the growing chorus of complaints. The crystalline Vorthons criticized human diplomatic methods as too direct and emotionally driven. The gaseous nebulites found human terraforming techniques crude and environmentally damaging. The machine intelligence of the synthetic collective declared human artificial intelligence to be laughably primitive. Ambassador Morrison listened to each criticism with patient attention, occasionally making notes on his simple tablet device. His calm demeanor seemed to frustrate some delegates, who had expected anger or desperate pleas for reconsideration. Instead, he sat quietly while 20 years of human effort was systematically dismantled and dismissed. The Zephyrian delegates, colors shifted to a decisive gold as she prepared to deliver her final statement. The entire chamber fell silent, thousands of alien eyes and sensors focusing on her floating form. Therefore, she announced, the Galactic Council moves to terminate humanity's membership, effective immediately. They will be given one standard, Galactic Month, to remove all personnel and equipment from Council space. All trade agreements, defense pacts, and research collaborations will be dissolved. The human species will return to their origin system and remain there until such time as they develop capabilities worthy of galactic civilization. The vote was swift and decisive. 11 species voted in favor of expulsion, with only the humans abstaining. The translation network carried the sound of clicking mandibles, harmonic humming, and electronic pulses that all meant the same thing: agreement. Ambassador Morrison finally stood, his movement so smooth and unhurried that it drew attention from every corner of the vast chamber. He looked around the table, meeting the eyes and sensors of each delegate in turn. When he spoke, his voice was calm and clear, carrying easily through the chamber's acoustic systems. The human delegation accepts the Council's decision, he said simply. We request only the standard month to withdraw our people and assets from Council space, as is our right under galactic law. We will cause no trouble and leave no damage behind us. The ease of his acceptance sent ripples of surprise through the assembled delegates. Many had expected protests, threats, or at least some emotional outburst. Instead, the human ambassador gathered his few belongings with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout the proceedings. As he walked toward the chamber's exit, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence, Ambassador Morrison paused at the threshold. Without turning around, he spoke one final time. We thank the Council for these 20 years of cooperation, he said. We wish you all well in your future endeavors. Then he was gone, leaving behind a chamber full of aliens who were just beginning to realize they might have made a terrible mistake. The message reached every human outpost in Council space within 6 hours of the vote. Dr. Sam Rodriguez read it 3 times before setting down his tablet and looking out the observation window of Research Station Kepler-7. The binary stars of the Vorthon system cast dancing shadows across the laboratory where he had spent the last 8 years of his life. Pack it up, he told his team quietly. We're going home. Dr. Amy Walsh looked up from her microscope where she had been studying samples of crystalline life forms found nowhere else in the galaxy. Her face showed the same mixture of disappointment and resignation that Sam felt in his chest. All of it? She asked, gesturing toward the rows of equipment and specimen containers that represented decades of careful research. Everything we can carry, Sam replied. But we document everything we leave behind. Full technical specifications, research notes, experimental procedures. We're not going to sabotage their future research just because they don't want us around anymore. The work began immediately. Human researchers across the station started the careful process of backing up data, cataloging specimens, and creating detailed instruction manuals for the alien scientists who would inherit their work. It was methodical and professional, the same approach humans brought to everything they did. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Bill Parker supervised the shutdown of the station's human-designed power grid. The fusion reactors his team had installed were more efficient than anything the Council species used, but they were also simpler and easier to maintain. He made sure to leave complete maintenance schedules and troubleshooting guides, even though no one had asked for them. "Why are we being so helpful?" asked his assistant, Lisa Kumar, as she finished calibrating the backup power systems. "They just kicked us out." Bill wiped grease from his hands and considered the question. "Because that's who we are," he said finally. "We don't burn bridges just because someone else wants to cross them alone." Similar scenes played out across Council space as humans began the largest evacuation in their species' history. On the EA trading post at Nexus Station, Merchant Captain Tony Barnes closed deals with alien competitors, transferring shipping contracts and trade routes with the same attention to detail he had always shown. He could have kept the profitable routes secret, but instead he provided detailed maps and customer preferences to ensure smooth transitions. The Altarian portmaster watched in confusion as Barnes handed over data crystals containing years of accumulated knowledge about interstellar shipping. "You are giving this to us for free?" the scaled alien asked, his fins twitching with bewilderment. "No point in keeping it now," Barnes replied with a shrug. "Besides, someone needs to make sure these trade routes stay open. People depend on them." On the orbital city of Haven Prime, human construction crews worked overtime to finish the projects they had started. The new habitat rings were almost complete, designed to house refugee populations from war-torn systems. The human workers could have walked away, leaving the job half-finished, but team leader Carol Stevens refused to consider it. "These homes are needed," she told her crew as they worked through another double shift. "Doesn't matter who's going to live in them or who's going to get credit for building them. People need places to sleep, and we know how to build them right." The alien supervisors watched in amazement as humans not only completed their assigned work, but also trained their replacements with patience and thoroughness. No detail was too small, no procedure too obvious to explain. The humans acted as if they were handing over the projects to trusted colleagues rather than to the people who had just evicted them from the galaxy. Captain Lisa Carter coordinated the evacuation from her flagship, the Freedom's Call, monitoring the progress of human withdrawal across dozens of star systems. Her tactical displays showed the movement of ships and personnel with the precision of a military operation, but there was something different about this retreat. The humans weren't running away in panic or anger. They were conducting an orderly withdrawal that prioritized safety and efficiency above all else. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're getting requests from 3 different council species asking for technical assistance with systems we're leaving behind." Carter smiled grimly. "Respond positively to all requests. Provide whatever help they need." She paused, studying the star charts that showed human positions throughout council space. "Make sure they understand our maintenance schedules and replacement part requirements. Some of those systems will need servicing sooner than they think." The requests for assistance kept coming as the weeks passed. The Korthak military discovered that human-designed sensor arrays were more complex than they appeared, requiring specific calibration procedures that weren't immediately obvious. The Zephyrian colonies found that their atmospheric processors worked perfectly until they tried to modify the settings, at which point the systems became incomprehensibly complicated. Dr. Rodriguez found himself conducting virtual training sessions for Etherian scientists who were taking over his laboratory. The energy beings were brilliant researchers, but they struggled with the physical manipulation of solid matter that came naturally to humans. What looked like simple equipment operation was actually a carefully refined process that took years to master. The crystalline samples must be kept at exactly 2.7 degrees below ambient temperature, he explained patiently during one session. Any variation will cause them to shift phase and lose their unique properties. The cooling system we built can maintain that temperature automatically, but you need to recalibrate it every 47 hours. The Etherian scientist flickered with what might have been frustration. "Why such precise timing? Our systems typically operate on standard cycles." "Because that's how long it takes for the crystal's internal structure to drift," Rodriguez replied. "We discovered it through trial and error over about 3 years. You can verify our calculations if you want, but trust me, 47 hours is the magic number." As the evacuation progressed, it became clear that humans had been involved in far more projects than anyone realized. They had quietly integrated themselves into every aspect of Council civilization, not through grand gestures or political maneuvering, but through simple competence and reliability. Their withdrawal left gaps that weren't immediately obvious, but would become critical over time. The last human transport left Council space on schedule, exactly 1 month after the vote. Captain Carter watched from her bridge as the final ship made the jump to hyperspace, carrying the last group of human civilians to safety. Behind them, they left a galaxy that was already beginning to discover how much it had depended on the quiet humans who asked for little and gave much. The Freedom's Call was the last human vessel in Council space, and Carter took a moment to look back at the stars that had been humanity's home for 20 years. Then she gave the order to jump, and the humans disappeared into the vast darkness between the spiral arms, carrying with them knowledge and capabilities that the galaxy was only beginning to understand. The human fleet assembled at Rally Point Alpha looked like a small city floating in the darkness between stars. 300 ships of various sizes formed a loose formation around Captain Carter's flagship, their running lights creating a constellation of hope in the endless void. Civilian transports carried families and their possessions, while cargo vessels held the tools and equipment needed to build new homes among distant stars. Admiral Ben Thompson stood beside Carter on the bridge of the Freedom's Call, watching the final preparations for humanity's journey into the unknown. His weathered face showed no trace of regret as he studied the fleet status report scrolling across his tablet. Final head count is just over 2 million souls, he reported quietly. Every human who wanted to leave Council space is accounted for. We've got supplies for 18 months of independent operation, plus the equipment to establish permanent colonies on 12 different world types. Carter nodded, her attention focused on the star charts displayed on the main screen. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast, beyond imagination, with most of its stellar systems still unexplored or dismissed as worthless by the Council species. What others saw as empty space, humans saw as opportunity. Navigation has confirmed our first destination, she announced to the fleet. System designation KC-2E847, approximately 400 light-years from our current position. Long-range surveys suggest 3 potentially habitable worlds with no evidence of intelligent life. Estimated travel time is 6 weeks. The convoy began moving with the practiced coordination of a species that had learned to work together or die alone. Military escorts took positions around the civilian vessels, their sensors sweeping space for any signs of danger. The humans had no intention of fighting their way out of Council space, but they weren't naive enough to travel undefended either. Dr. Rodriguez found himself aboard the research vessel Discovery, surrounded by the scientific equipment and specimen, samples his team had managed to save from their evacuation. The ship's laboratories were cramped compared to what they had left behind, but they were functional and would serve until permanent facilities could be established. "Sam," called Dr. Walsh from across the lab, "you need to see this data from the deep space surveys." She gestured toward her workstation, where streams of information scrolled past in neat columns. The humans who mapped these outer systems over the past 10 years found something interesting. Rodriguez joined her at the console, studying the mineral composition reports and planetary analysis data that human exploration teams had quietly gathered during their time in Council space. What he saw made him whistle softly in surprise. "Heavy elements," he muttered, tracing his finger across the screen. "Rare earth deposits, quantum crystalline formations, and look at this," he pointed to a specific entry. "Concentrated veins of trilithium on at least 6 different worlds." Trilithium was one of the most valuable substances in the galaxy, essential for advanced energy production and faster-than-light communication systems. The Council species had been searching for major deposits for centuries, never realizing that humans had been quietly mapping potential sources in systems too remote for profitable exploitation. "The Council thinks these systems are worthless because they're so far from major trade routes," Walsh observed. "But if we're planning to live out here permanently, distance from the Council might actually be an advantage." On the command ship, Captain Carter reviewed similar reports with growing satisfaction. Human exploration teams had been far more thorough than anyone realized, conducting detailed surveys of thousands of star systems that other species had written off as uninteresting. The data painted a picture of unprecedented opportunity for a species willing to work hard and think long-term. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the trailing elements of the fleet. Put it through," Carter replied, expecting routine status updates from the ships bringing up the rear of their formation. Instead, the face of Captain Steve Miller appeared on her screen, his expression showing barely controlled excitement. Miller commanded the heavy transport New Horizons, one of the largest vessels in the human fleet. "Lisa, you're not going to believe what we found in the shipping containers from Nexus Station," he said without preamble. "The inventory manifest doesn't match what's actually in Storage Bay 7. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Our manifest shows industrial replicators and standard manufacturing equipment," Miller continued. "What we actually have is a complete planetary development package: atmospheric processors, terraforming seeds, orbital construction platforms, and enough automated manufacturing systems to build a technological civilization from scratch." The implications hit Carter immediately. Someone among the human population had been planning for this day, quietly assembling the tools needed for complete independence from Council civilization. The equipment Miller described could transform uninhabitable worlds into garden paradises and establish self-sufficient colonies capable of supporting millions of people. "Who authorized this cargo?" she asked. Miller grinned. "The shipping orders are signed by Ambassador Morrison himself. Apparently, he's been preparing for the possibility of human expulsion for quite some time." Similar discoveries emerged throughout the fleet as ship captains conducted detailed inventory checks: medical supplies that could treat alien diseases humans had never encountered, agricultural seeds for crops that could grow in extreme environments, manufacturing templates for technologies that seemed far too advanced for human science to have developed independently. Dr. Angela Foster, the fleet's chief medical officer, made perhaps the most surprising discovery aboard the hospital ship, Mercy. Hidden among standard medical supplies, she found sophisticated genetic analysis equipment and biological samples from every known intelligent species in the galaxy. "This is incredible," she reported to Carter during their daily briefing. "We have complete genetic profiles for all 12 Council species, plus detailed medical data on their biology, psychology, and social behavior. This information could save lives if we ever encounter these species again, but it also represents decades of careful research and observation." The true scope of human preparation became clear as the fleet journeyed deeper into unexplored space. Every ship contained hidden treasures of knowledge and equipment that spoke to careful planning and patient accumulation of resources. The humans hadn't just been kicked out of Council space. They had been preparing to leave for years, quietly building the foundation for an independent human civilization among the stars. 3 weeks into their journey, the fleet encountered its first real test. Long-range sensors detected a massive asteroid field blocking their planned route, forcing a choice between a dangerous passage through the debris or a lengthy detour that would consume precious fuel reserves. Captain Carter called a fleet-wide conference, linking every ship's command crew into a single communication network. The discussion that followed demonstrated the human approach to problem-solving that had so often frustrated their alien allies. "We could blast our way through," suggested one captain. "Our weapons are capable of clearing a path." "Too risky," replied another. "Debris could damage the civilian transports." "What about going around?" asked a third voice. "It would add 2 weeks to our travel time, but it would be safer." The debate continued for hours, with every option examined from multiple angles. Finally, Chief Engineer Parker proposed a typically human solution. "Why don't we mine it?" he suggested. "That asteroid field contains enough raw materials to build a dozen new ships. We take what we need, clear the path, and arrive at our destination with more resources than we started with." The plan was audacious, requiring precise coordination between dozens of ships and hundreds of work crews. But it was also brilliantly practical, turning an obstacle into an opportunity. Within days, human mining teams were extracting valuable metals and rare elements from the asteroids, while construction crews began assembling new equipment from the harvested materials. The Galactic Council would have dismissed such an approach as crude and inefficient. To humans, it was simply good sense. Governor Zelkon of the Zephyrian outer colonies floated anxiously in his command chamber, his translucent body shifting through nervous shades of yellow and orange as he reviewed the latest security reports. 3 months had passed since the humans departed Council space, and the crime statistics made for disturbing reading. Pirate attacks have increased by 40% in the past month alone, his security chief reported, her own bioluminescent patterns flickering with concern. The raiders are hitting supply convoys, mining operations, and even civilian transports. They seem to have no fear of retaliation. Zelkon's colors darkened to a troubled purple. Where are the patrol fleets? The Korthak military promised increased security coverage after the humans left. The security chief's patterns shifted to an embarrassed amber. The Korthak forces are spread too thin. They're trying to cover the same territory that human patrol squadrons used to handle, but with less than half the ships. Response times to distress calls have tripled. The problem was more complex than simple numbers. Human patrol tactics had been based on unpredictability and rapid response, with small squadrons of fast ships appearing wherever pirates least expected them. The Korthak military preferred large formations and overwhelming firepower, an approach that worked well in open warfare, but proved inadequate for police actions across vast distances. On the trading station at Nexus Prime, Port Master Vectar was dealing with his own crisis. The Altarian had managed interstellar commerce for over 2 centuries, but the past 3 months had tested his abilities like never before. Cargo shipments that had once moved smoothly through the station now created bottlenecks and delays that seemed to multiply with each passing day. The logistics software is malfunctioning again, his chief systems operator reported, her scaled fingers dancing across control surfaces that had once responded smoothly to human programming. Every time we try to optimize shipping routes, the system generates impossible configurations. Vectar examined the display screens showing cargo movements throughout the station. What had once been an elegant dance of efficiency now looked like chaos barely held in check. Ships waited for docking clearance while empty berths sat unused. Cargo containers accumulated in the wrong storage areas, and priority shipments somehow ended up buried behind routine freight. The humans made this look so easy, he muttered, remembering how smoothly operations had run when human technicians maintained the systems. Their software seemed simple, but every time we try to modify it, everything breaks down. The truth was that human-designed logistics programs were marvels of adaptive intelligence, capable of learning from experience and adjusting to changing conditions in real time. What appeared to be simple scheduling software was actually a sophisticated, artificial intelligence that had been trained through years of practical experience. Without human oversight, the systems gradually lost their ability to handle unexpected situations. Dr. Xantar, the Council's chief scientific officer, was making similar discoveries in her research facilities on Titan Station. The Etherian's energy form flickered with frustrated confusion as she reviewed data from projects that had been running smoothly for years before suddenly developing inexplicable problems. This quantum resonance experiment has completely destabilized, she reported to her research team during their weekly status meeting. The harmonic frequencies that maintained stable resonance for the past 5 years are now causing cascade failures. Her assistant, a crystalline Vorthon named Kefsos, examined the data with growing concern. The original research notes indicate that human scientists Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Walsh developed the stabilization protocols. Perhaps their departure has affected the experimental parameters. Dr. Xantar's form brightened with realization. Bring up the complete research archives. I want to see every project where humans were listed as contributors." The results were startling. Human researchers had been involved in nearly 60% of the Council's active scientific projects, often in ways that seemed minor but proved to be critical. They had developed calibration procedures, safety protocols, and maintenance schedules that kept complex experiments running smoothly. Without their constant attention to detail, sophisticated research programs were beginning to fail. "How is this possible?" Dr. Zentar asked, her energy patterns shifting to confused spirals. "Human technology appeared so primitive compared to our advanced systems." Kefsos studied the data with the methodical patience of his crystalline species. "Perhaps we confused complexity with effectiveness. The humans seemed to prefer simple solutions that worked reliably over elegant systems that required constant adjustment." The agricultural worlds of the Mid-Rim were experiencing their own crisis, as crop yields plummeted across multiple systems. The Nebulite farming coordinator Wispier drifted through the failing crop fields of Ceres Prime, her gaseous form rippling with distress at the sight of withering plants and diseased soil. "The bacterial balance is completely wrong," she transmitted to the Agricultural Council. "The soil microorganisms that supported healthy plant growth are dying off, and we cannot determine why." The answer lay buried in files that human agricultural advisors had maintained for nearly a decade. Human farmers had discovered that alien soils required specific combinations of earth bacteria to maintain proper nutrient cycles. They had quietly introduced these organisms to farming worlds throughout Council space, carefully monitoring their populations and adjusting bacterial cultures to maintain optimal growing conditions. Without human oversight, the delicate biological balance that supported galactic agriculture was collapsing. Crop failures spread from world to world as alien farmers struggled to understand the complex relationships between soil chemistry, bacterial populations, and plant health that humans had managed with seemingly effortless competence. Commander Zeklos of the Altarian Defense Force found himself facing the most humiliating defeat of his military career. The Nexus pirates, who had once been a minor nuisance easily contained by coordinated patrols, had evolved into a serious threat capable of challenging military task forces in open combat. "How did they become so organized?" he demanded during an emergency strategy session with his senior officers. 3 months ago, these pirates operated in small bands with minimal coordination. Now they're conducting fleet actions with tactical sophistication that rivals our own. His intelligence. Chief, a young Altarian named Tevkan, provided an answer that no one wanted to hear. "Sir, our analysis suggests that the pirates have been studying human tactical manuals captured from abandoned military bases. They're using human strategies against us." The irony was bitter. Human military doctrine had emphasized flexibility, rapid response, and the ability to coordinate multiple small units across vast distances. These same tactics, originally developed to protect Council shipping, were now being used to prey upon it. The pirates had learned from human example while the Council forces struggled to adapt their own rigid command structures to the fluid nature of anti-piracy operations. In the Galactic Council chambers, emergency sessions became routine as crisis reports arrived from every corner of civilized space. The Zephyrian delegates' bioluminescent displays had lost their previous confidence, shifting through worried patterns of blue and gray as she addressed the assembled representatives. "The situation is deteriorating faster than our models predicted," she admitted, her voice carrying none of its former authority. "Economic disruption, security failures, and infrastructure breakdowns are occurring simultaneously across multiple sectors." The Korthak military representative clicked his mandibles. Nervously, "Our forces are stretched beyond safe operational limits. We require additional resources to maintain even minimal security coverage." "Resources that we cannot spare," replied the Altarian trade minister, his fins drooping with exhaustion. "Commercial revenues have declined 30% as shipping. Delays cascade throughout the trade networks. We cannot fund military expansion when our economy is contracting. The Etherean delegate flickered with what might have been embarrassment. Our scientific research programs are experiencing similar difficulties. Projects that ran smoothly for years are now failing at an alarming rate. We may need to suspend several critical experiments until we can determine what went wrong. A pattern was emerging that none of the Council species wanted to acknowledge. The problems they faced weren't random failures or temporary setbacks. They were the predictable consequences of removing a species that had quietly become essential to the functioning of galactic civilization. But pride prevented them from admitting their mistake, and fear kept them from considering the obvious solution. Instead, they searched for technical fixes and emergency measures, hoping to solve problems that they didn't yet fully understand. In the silence between stars, the human fleet continued its journey toward a new home, unaware of the chaos spreading through the galaxy they had left behind. 1 year after humanity's departure, the Galactic Council faced a crisis that threatened the very foundation of their civilization. Agent Vashati of the Etherean Intelligence Collective materialized in the secure briefing chamber, her energy form crackling with barely contained urgency as she presented her findings to the emergency session. "The situation is far worse than we initially understood," she transmitted directly into the minds of the assembled council members. "Our investigation has revealed that humans were not merely participants in galactic civilization. They were the invisible foundation that kept it functioning." The holographic display activated, showing a complex web of connections that spanned the entire galaxy. Red lines indicated failed systems, broken trade routes, and collapsed security networks. The pattern was unmistakable. Every critical failure could be traced back to the absence of human involvement. Governor Zelkon's bioluminescent form had faded to a sickly gray as he described the complete breakdown of order in the outer colonies. "The Nexus pirates now control 37 star systems," he reported, his voice hollow with defeat. "They've established their own government and are demanding tribute from merchant vessels traveling through what they call their territory." The transformation of the pirates from scattered raiders into an organized nation had shocked the Council. Intelligence reports revealed that the criminal organization had adopted human military structures, political systems, and even economic theories captured from abandoned databases. They governed their territory with brutal efficiency, providing the stability and security that the Council forces could no longer maintain. Commander Zeklos of the Altarian Defense Force stood before the Council in disgrace, his fins drooping with exhaustion. "Our losses in the past 6 months exceed our casualties from the last 50 years of conventional military operations," he admitted. "The pirates fight using human tactics that our traditional strategies cannot counter." The irony was painful. Human military advisors had spent years training Council forces in anti-piracy operations, sharing tactical knowledge and coordination techniques that had kept the trade routes safe. Now those same methods were being used against them by criminals, who had learned from captured human databases and training materials. Dr. Zentar's research into the scientific crisis had yielded equally disturbing results. Her energy form flickered with patterns of confusion as she described discoveries that challenged everything the Council thought they knew about human capabilities. "We have identified over 400 critical research projects that depended on human contributions," she reported to the assembled delegates. "In every case, humans were credited as minor participants or technical assistants. However, detailed analysis reveals that their contributions were fundamental to project success. The examples were staggering. Medical treatments that had saved millions of lives were based on human research into alien biology. Terraforming techniques that had created garden worlds relied on human understanding of ecological balance. Even basic manufacturing processes had been quietly improved by human engineers who saw inefficiencies that escaped more advanced species. This quantum resonance therapy that has treated neural disorders in 12 different species, Dr. Zentar, Continued, highlighting specific research files, was developed entirely by Dr. Angela Foster and her human team. We provided the laboratory space and equipment, but the theoretical framework, experimental design, and practical implementation were all human innovations. The Altarian Trade Minister's report painted an equally grim picture of economic collapse. Supply chains that had operated smoothly for decades were breaking down as coordination failures cascaded throughout the galactic marketplace. The humans didn't just move cargo, he explained, his scales dulled with fatigue. They identified market inefficiencies and created trade routes that seemed impossible but proved highly profitable. They could predict demand fluctuations months in advance and position resources accordingly. The evidence was in the numbers. Before human involvement, galactic trade had been profitable but predictable, with established routes connecting major worlds in patterns that had remained unchanged for centuries. Human merchants had revolutionized commerce by finding value in seemingly worthless transactions, creating complex trading networks that generated wealth from margins too small for other species to notice. They turned waste products into valuable resources, the trade minister continued. Agricultural byproducts that we discarded became raw materials for manufacturing. Mineral deposits that we considered too poor to mine became profitable operations. They saw opportunities where we saw only problems. The social and political implications were perhaps most disturbing of all. Ambassador Kethron, the elderly diplomat who had replaced Ambassador Morrison, presented intelligence reports that revealed the scope of human diplomatic activity throughout Council space. Humans prevented 14 potential wars during their time in Council space, he announced, his voice heavy with the weight of his discoveries. Border disputes that should have erupted into armed conflicts were resolved through human mediation. Cultural misunderstandings that might have destroyed alliances were addressed by human cultural advisors. The evidence filled terabytes of classified files. Human diplomats had worked quietly behind the scenes, identifying potential conflicts. Before they became critical and diffusing tensions through careful negotiation, they possessed an almost supernatural ability to understand the psychological motivations of alien species, using that knowledge to find solutions that satisfied all parties. They knew us better than we knew ourselves, Kethran continued. They studied our histories, our cultures, our fears and desires with scientific precision. When disputes arose, they could predict exactly what each side needed to hear to reach agreement. The Vorthon representative's crystalline form resonated with harmonics of disbelief. How is this possible? Human psychology seemed so simple compared to our advanced mental capabilities. Perhaps, Kethran suggested quietly, we confused emotional sophistication with psychological insight. Humans experienced basic emotions, but they understood the complex motivations that drive intelligent behavior. They could predict how we would react to specific situations because they had studied us with the patience of scientists and the empathy of artists. As the reports continued, a terrifying picture emerged of galactic civilization balanced on a foundation of human competence that no one had recognized until it was gone. The Council species had been so focused on advanced technology and elegant solutions that they had missed the practical wisdom that kept their society functioning. The agricultural crisis had reached catastrophic proportions. Famines spread across worlds that had been food exporters just months earlier. The complex relationships between soil chemistry, bacterial populations, and plant growth that humans had managed through careful observation were beyond the ability of other species to replicate quickly. We're looking at potential starvation. For billions of beings, reported the Nebulite agricultural coordinator, her gaseous form rippling with distress. Our most advanced biological sciences cannot reproduce the simple farming techniques that humans developed through trial and error. The security situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst predictions. Pirates controlled major shipping lanes. Planetary governments struggled with internal unrest, and the Council's military forces were stretched to the breaking point. The elegant strategies preferred by advanced military minds proved ineffective against enemies who used human-inspired tactics of flexibility and rapid adaptation. Most humbling of all was the realization that humans had been trying to warn them. Archives revealed dozens of reports and recommendations that human advisors had submitted over the years, suggesting improvements and identifying potential problems. These documents had been dismissed as the crude observations of a primitive species, filed away and forgotten until crisis forced the Council to search for answers. They saw this coming, Agent Vashati concluded, her energy form pulsing with what might have been shame. Every problem we face today, every crisis that threatens our civilization, was predicted in human reports that we ignored. They tried to prepare us for these challenges, but we considered their warnings to be irrelevant. The silence that followed her presentation was broken only by the subtle sounds of alien breathing and the hum of translation equipment. Around the table, representatives of the galaxy's most advanced species contemplated the possibility that they had made the greatest mistake in recorded history. Finally, the Zephyrian delegate spoke, her colors shifting through patterns of desperate hope. "Can we contact them? Can we ask them to return?" The answer, when it came, would shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew about the humans they had so casually dismissed. 2 years after humanity's exodus, the Galactic Council chambers had lost their former grandeur. Half the seats sat empty as species withdrew from participation in a government that could no longer protect their interests. The remaining delegates looked haggard and desperate, their once proud civilizations crumbling under the weight of problems they could not solve. Ambassador Kethron stood before the assembled representatives, his elderly frame trembling as he delivered news that would shatter their last hopes. In his hands, he held a data crystal containing the most comprehensive intelligence assessment in Council history, a document that revealed the true scope of their catastrophic mistake. "Fellow delegates," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I have completed my investigation into human activities during their 20 years of Council membership. What I have discovered changes everything we thought we knew about our former allies. The holographic display activated, showing a galaxy-wide network of connections that defied comprehension. The web of human influence stretched into every corner of civilized space, touching systems and sectors that had never officially hosted human personnel. The humans weren't just members of our council," Kethran continued, his voice growing stronger with each revelation. "They were the invisible, guardians of galactic civilization. Every crisis we face today, every system failure that threatens our survival, was prevented by human intervention for decades." The first revelation concerned the Nexus pirates, whose transformation from scattered criminals into a galactic power had shocked the Council. Intelligence files revealed that the pirate organization had existed in its current form for over 15 years, held in check by a secret human operation that no one in the Council had ever suspected. "Human Intelligence Service," Kethron announced, the words falling like stones into the silent chamber. A covert organization that infiltrated criminal networks throughout the galaxy. They didn't just gather information about pirate activities. They manipulated criminal organizations from within, ensuring that pirates remained scattered and ineffective. Agent Vashati's energy form flickered with disbelief. Human intelligence capabilities were classified as minimal in all our assessments. "Because they wanted us to think that," Kethran replied grimly. Their operatives posed as merchants, researchers, and travelers, gathering intelligence that was shared with Council security forces through carefully disguised channels. Every successful anti-piracy operation of the past 2 decades was based on human intelligence that we never recognized as such. The scope of human deception was staggering. Files revealed the existence of human agents embedded in every major criminal organization, terrorist group, and separatist movement in the galaxy. These operatives had prevented assassinations, disrupted weapons smuggling, and neutralized threats before they could become dangerous. The Andromedan Liberation Front that planned to attack civilian targets throughout Council space, Catherine continued, displaying classified documents that made several delegates gasp in shock. Dismantled by human agents 18 months before. Their planned operations. The crystalline purity movement that wanted to eliminate all organic life forms. Infiltrated and neutralized by human operatives who spent 5 years gaining their trust. Dr. Zentar's research had uncovered equally disturbing truths about human scientific capabilities. The primitive technology that the Council had mocked was revealed to be deliberate misdirection, designed to hide revolutionary advances that other species weren't ready to understand. The humans were at least 50 years ahead of us in practical science, she reported, her energy patterns radiating embarrassment. Their fusion reactors weren't crude devices. They were masterpieces of engineering elegance that we couldn't appreciate because we expected complexity. Their computers weren't primitive silicon circuits. They were quantum biological hybrids that operated on principles we're only beginning to discover. The evidence was overwhelming. Human scientists had solved problems that the Council's greatest minds considered impossible, then disguised their solutions as simple modifications to existing technology. They had developed medical treatments, agricultural techniques, and manufacturing processes that seemed like minor improvements, but represented fundamental breakthroughs in applied science. They could have revolutionized our understanding of physics, Dr. Zentar continued, her voice hollow with regret. Instead, they chose to help us solve practical problems while hiding the theoretical foundations of their work. They knew that giving us advanced technology without understanding would be dangerous. The economic revelations were equally shocking. Human merchants hadn't just participated in galactic trade, they had quietly stabilized the entire economic system through sophisticated financial instruments that prevented market crashes and economic disasters. The Great Recession of 2387 that should have destroyed interstellar commerce, the Altarian trade minister reported, his scales pale with exhaustion. Prevented by human financial advisors who manipulated currency exchanges across 47 different star systems. The resource shortage crisis of 2391 that threatened to start wars over mineral rights. Resolved by human traders who had been stockpiling critical materials for precisely that situation. Human economic planning operated on timescales that other species found incomprehensible. They thought in terms of decades and centuries, positioning resources and establishing trade, relationships that would prevent future crises. Their apparent focus on small-scale commerce had hidden a sophisticated understanding of macroeconomic forces that kept galactic civilizations stable. The military intelligence was perhaps most devastating of all. Commander Zeklos presented evidence that human defensive capabilities had been deliberately understated to avoid triggering an arms race that could have destroyed the Alliance. Their weapons weren't primitive kinetic devices, he announced, his voice cracking with the weight of his discoveries. They were precision instruments capable of selective destruction that made our plasma weapons look like crude clubs. Their ships weren't slow and clumsy. They were perfectly balanced platforms that could outmaneuver anything we possessed. Humans had allowed other species to believe in their own superiority while quietly maintaining defensive capabilities that could have conquered the galaxy if they had chosen aggression over cooperation. Their restraint wasn't weakness. It was the discipline of a species that understood the true cost of war. As the reports continued, the full scope of human activities became clear. They had been the galaxy's doctors, teachers, protectors, and guardians, working behind the scenes to solve problems before they became crises. Their departure hadn't just removed a member species from the Council, it had eliminated the foundation. That kept galactic civilization functioning. Why? Asked the Zephyrian delegate, her bioluminescent displays flickering through patterns of confused desperation. Why didn't they tell us? Why did they hide their capabilities? Kethron consulted his files one final time before delivering the answer that would haunt the Council for generations. Because they were studying us, he said quietly. Every interaction, every cooperation project, every diplomatic exchange, was an elaborate test to determine whether our species were ready for true partnership. The silence that followed was deafening. The implications of his words settled over the chamber like a shroud, carrying with it the weight of cosmic failure. They were evaluating our civilization, Kethran continued, measuring our wisdom, our compassion, our ability to work together for mutual benefit. For 20 years, they helped us solve problems while secretly assessing whether we deserved their full trust and cooperation. The test results were clear. By voting to expel humanity from the Council, the galaxy's species had demonstrated that they weren't ready for the partnership that humans had offered. They had chosen pride over wisdom, prejudice over understanding, and isolation over cooperation. The final revelation came in the form of a message that arrived through old human communication channels just as Kethran finished his presentation. The transmission was brief, unsigned, and devastating in its simple dignity. The Galactic Council's recent communications regarding renewed cooperation have been received and reviewed. Humanity appreciates the Council's interest in re-establishing relations, but we have found our place among the stars and built new homes that suit our needs. We wish all Council species well in their future endeavors and hope they will find the wisdom to work together for the benefit of all sentient life. The stars are vast enough for everyone to find their destiny. The message was polite, professional, and absolutely final. The humans weren't angry or vindictive. They had simply moved on, leaving behind a galaxy that was finally beginning to understand what it had lost. In the Outer Rim territories that the Council had once dismissed as worthless, human civilization flourished among stars that other species had never thought to explore. Captain Carter, now Admiral Carter, stood on the observation deck of New Terra's orbital station, watching ships arrive from a dozen different human colonies. The network of worlds they had built operated with the efficiency and cooperation that had once served the galaxy, but now it served only humanity's growing civilization among the distant stars.